You're listening to The Secrets of Sacred Art, where we unearth the hidden treasures, history, and deeper meanings in religious and sacred art. We're your hosts, Alix Murray
and Kathryn Laffrey. Welcome to episode 47, The Shroud, the Icon of Christ. In this episode, we'll explore the history of the Shroud of Turin and its impact on how Jesus is portrayed and has been and is portrayed in sacred art. Please follow The Secrets of Sacred Art in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. For a fuller experience, you can enjoy us on the SQPN YouTube channel, where you'll see all the images we're discussing on the show. You can find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, on X at SQPN, or on Instagram at StarQuest Network.
Joining us today is Angela Selena. Hello,
hi there,
Angela. Hello. Welcome.
Hi, Angela.
Hi, welcome. Or thank you. I'm used to being a host, so I'm sorry. It's just autopilot.
Yes, be our guest. Yes.
So yes, tell our viewers what other things you've hosted for SQPN.
Oh yeah, well, I have been a long time fan and friend of SQPN, but today I'm actually here on behalf of my employer, Pilgrim Center of Hope, which is a Catholic evangelization apostolate in San Antonio, Texas. And we have many Shroud of Turin projects. So that is why I am here today. And I'd be happy to talk more about that in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. So this, we have a little bit of a different take with our show on the Shroud. There have been I think it's probably one of the most studied objects on the planet, if I'm correct. Yeah, I mean, a lot. So there are other professionals who are doing that. What we're doing is just taking a little bit of a different take and talking about the art inspired by it, as Kathryn said. So it's a little different. But one of the things I'm curious about, Angela, is what is your favorite style of sacred art?
So I tend to be a little bit, I don't say this lightly, but I have like OCD tendencies. So I prefer iconography, simple sacred art that doesn't have a whole lot going on. When I walk into like a Gothic or neo-Gothic style building, it is truly overwhelming for my senses and my nervous system. So I prefer the simple. Right now, this year, my patron saint is Saint Therese. So I am on a little way journey this year in particular. Okay. But yeah, that's kind of my style.
Nice. Well, I have to say, I love all sacred art, but I definitely, it makes sense because we've actually covered some. In fact, it was a St. Nicholas in Spain, Kathryn.
Yes.
When I said, "Oh my gosh, I'd have to be really prepared to go into that space because it was so much." So I completely,
Baroque.
Baroque is a lot. You know, it can be stunningly beautiful, but then it can also be a lot.
Which is probably how you feel when you get into heaven, right? I mean, it's probably a little overwhelming.
Well, do you know what I was thinking? It's funny you say that because I'm not aiming for purgatory. Like, I'm aiming for heaven.
Yeah.
And if I hit purgatory first, fine, but I'm not aiming for purgatory. But I thought that when I visited the Vatican and went through the museums and the galleries, it struck me of God's mercy in purgatory, because I'm somebody, when I take in art, we've talked about this. So it's like you can hear art, you can feel it, you can, see it. And it was amazing to go to the museum at the Vatican. But by the end, I felt like I had a little glimpse of heaven, but my head was killing me. And I had to go and lie down and like just keep my eyes closed and like turn off the lights and everything. And it kind of made me think of the mercy of purgatory. Because if you're not prepared for heaven and you get there, you can't do it. And so, yeah, I think and of course, that's what sacred art is supposed to help us do. It's supposed to be preparing us for the beauty of heaven, which is why it needs to be beautiful. Anyway.
Well, talking about
speaking of beautiful,
and
yes.
I love the fact that God has left us over the centuries so many little signs and symbols. And this one has always captivated me. This is the Shroud of Turin in its beautiful frame. And if you look real carefully in the center, especially off to the center left, you'll see the face. Now, I know a lot of people think that they can, they see the image better when it's in its negative. For me, I love it as is. I got to see the Kodak photo that's the exact same size as the shroud. A couple years ago, it was touring up here in Michigan. And just to stand in front of it and go, this is the exact same size, hyper detailed. You could see the threads and everything. And I was like, that's all I needed to see. It was amazing.
Yeah, we have a full-size replica here at Pilgrim Center of Hope, and it's one of there are many exhibits throughout the world, but we're blessed to have a life-size certified replica of the shroud, as well as life-size negatives. So we put a light behind that. If you just look at the negatives, the photographic negatives of the shroud, it's pretty dark. But if you get light behind it, which is beautiful, right? I know we're going to be talking about light. People just have an emotional reaction to the image, the positive as well, but the negative, as we'll talk about, the shroud itself is a photograph. And that's part of the mystery of it, is that the positive image that we see with our eyes of the shroud is actually a photographic negative. So if you reverse the lights and the darks of the shroud, you see what we're used to seeing as a photographic image of a man, right? Of his front and back, head to head. So that's one of the amazing things about, looking at the shroud, is that it's astounding, right? It's a marvel.
Yeah. I mean, and it's so, one of the things that when people do debate, is this really the shroud? And they go into how, this is why it isn't. But what they don't ever answer is, well, if it isn't, then how was it made? And why wasn't anything else made at that time like this? Why can't we find other examples of this? Do you see what I'm saying?
Why aren't there hundreds of copies of it?
Yeah, because wouldn't you, like, if you wanted to scam a bunch of people, wouldn't you make a lot of copies of this? But they can't tell us how people could have even created this. And Angela, you might know about this, and I'm probably getting it completely wrong. I was listening to Father Robert Spitzer, whom I love, at the Magis Center, and he was saying that there's something about when they were in the process of studying the shroud, scientists are now thinking about like an alternative energy source or something. What's that all about?
Yeah, well, there are many, many theories about, how was the shroud created, obviously, right? One of them being it's a forgery. But the right now, the consideration is that there had to have been an extremely high amount of energy, like a burst of energy, at a minute, like a tiny fraction of time, for this phenomenon to have happened. So it's like you said, Alix, it's not any type of energy or even light bursts that our current technology can recreate, even though people have tried and are still trying, right? And are still studying.
Yeah.
But that's the theory at this point. is that it would have had to have been, like I said, it's a photograph. So just the properties of it, if you're not familiar with the shroud and you're listening, the shroud is a piece of linen cloth that is a herringbone weave, very fine herringbone weave, that many people believe is the burial cloth of Christ. And it has the image of a man that is like not even the width of a human hair on the very, very top layer of the fabric. So this is truly a photograph because of the 3D properties that have been found on the shroud. And that was what compelled the original researchers, the STURP team, as they're known, Shroud of Turin research project in 1978, to obtain access to the shroud, because they ran the shroud, an image of the shroud, through what's called a VP8 analyzer. And that revealed that the image actually has three-dimensional properties within itself. It contains 3D data within the image. And you take any typical photograph that we know of and put it through that same machine, it doesn't give that. It just gives gobbledygook. So that's why the scientists were so intrigued by this image.
And I put in our show notes the link directly to the 3D graphic artist who worked on a lot of that imagery. So Ray Downing, there's a video clip on YouTube, then I've added that to our show notes. I highly recommend this for people to see. It's amazing. And I love the work that he did on it, staying so true to what was presented to him. And it's just beautiful work. And now he's even added a whole gallery of art where he's taken that 3D image and, okay, let's see what this 3D face of Christ would have looked like at this moment, looking at different passages from the gospel. So you get a lot of really neat, opportunities to kind of ponder, which is what the sacred art's about. We're trying to ponder different elements of what God has put before us. And here we have in this image, Pope Francis having his opportunity. He went and got to see and spend time in prayer in front of the Shroud of Turin in 2015. It's just beautiful to see the opportunities that have been placed before us in taking a look upon the face of Christ.
Yeah.
I believe it is. I can't say otherwise.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have to say I'm in agreement with you, only because, as I said, I don't know, especially Angela, when you talk about these, like, why and how would someone make something that has 3D properties within it? Why? And I just think it's an incredible mystery. I mean, you know what? I actually wonder if this probably falls into the realm of other mysteries that we will have complete answers to on the other side, as long as we're aiming towards heaven and not purgatory. And but I just wonder if it's something that we will never understand it, because it's like a tangible mystery of God. It's kind of neat.
So Angela, why don't you tell us more about where you are and what you're doing with this? Who is the man in the shroud?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity. In 2011, I believe it was, our apostolate sent a couple of groups to, or maybe it was 2010, sent a couple of groups to Turin to see the shroud because it was on display. And it's not on display very often. It's actually rarely on display. But it was put on display by the Pope. The Pope is the custodian of the shroud. It was given to the popes by the family that previously owned it, which, I don't know how much time we'll have for the history of the shroud, but the point being that the shroud was on display. We took some pilgrims over to see it, and they said, gosh, they were so impacted by it. So we have to have something like this where we live for people to be able to come see this marvel. And so through some generous donations, we worked to create an exhibition called Who is the Man of the Shroud? It originally was based on the exhibition in Jerusalem at the Pontifical Institute, Notre Dame in Jerusalem. And since then, it has grown and developed over time. We also are blessed to have a Eucharistic chapel on our property, and the chapel is the last stop on the exhibition, because we have, talking about 3D data, 3D sculpture, bronze sculpture there that you see there by an Italian artist, the same sculptor, Luigi Mattei, who created the bronze doors of St. Mary Major Basilica in Rome. And so he worked with the 3D data of the shroud. As you can see, he didn't put all the wounds on the man because he felt that it would be too overwhelming for the viewer to see all of the wounds, but he put the major wounds. And what people are able to do is they're able to touch the man of the shroud, which is amazing, and to see that peaceful countenance on his face despite everything that he went through. So we take people through a journey on this exhibition, and the goal is for people to come to their own conclusion, who is the man of the shroud? Because we believe, as an evangelization apostolate, that the Lord speaks to people in different ways, and to really respect the conscience of each individual, you allow them to have that experience of going through the history, the art, the scripture, the scientific data. And then finally encountering this bronze sculpture, you realize you have to decide for yourself, who is this man? What is this shroud? And we're just awestruck to see the, people that have absolutely no faith, right? They just come in and they just, at the end, we've heard stories, people saying, I want to learn more. A couple of weeks ago, we go out to, in the community, we went out to a public school recently, gave a presentation, and then somebody came and saw the exhibition, and she says, I'm Mormon and I want to be Catholic now.
Oh, wow. Hey, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, all kinds of folks, Uber drivers just coming in. I don't know what this is that I saw on the street, but I want to come in and see it. And yeah, they're meeting God right through this shroud. So this is what makes it a beautiful thing. And
I have used that statue when I'm working on anything that has to do with the face of Christ.
Oh, really?
I love having pictures of that statue when I'm working.
Yeah. It's pure bronze, so it is very heavy. And there's just a few copies in the world of it. So you're welcome, if you're listening to this, to come to San Antonio. The exhibit is free to see Who is the Man of the Shroud exhibition. And but we just recently, got this exhibition physically at our center. We had the elements. We kind of needed to put it together, and then COVID happened. And so we decided to start a streaming series to start engaging people in that. So I've been blessed to, design the panels for the museum exhibition, direct and co-produce the streaming series, which I pray we will have the resources to be able to continue. We have, awesome award-winning musician doing the soundtrack. From Canada, we have a wonderful director of photography that works with us. And the guy that you see there blocking the sun for our camera, AJ, he actually, he has a wonderful 3D printing business where he's actually been able to 3D print a miniature tomb of Christ. And so he started with our exhibition, and then he's been in demand now, other exhibitions around the world to do different sizes. One in California he did recently is one that you can actually sit in.
Gosh, wow.
Yeah. So this is really exciting. So if you're interested in that, I invite you to go to discoverwho.org. Discoverwho.org is where we have more info about the exhibit as well as the streaming series. But I'm I'm happy to share here as in our discussion today about some of the sacred art, things that I've learned along the way. Got to interview a couple of people that were actually in the original STIRP team who had physical access to the shroud, and one, Barry Schwartz, before he passed away. He passed away last year. And there are not many members left of the original team. So it's been a real privilege to be able to do.
I bet. So my question for you, Angela, is when are you going to bring this on the road and come to the UK?
Yeah, well, we definitely can. I mean, we've been taking our presentations all over the country, and they're in demand. So, if parishes are interested, they can contact us at Pilgrim Center of Hope, and we can work something out for you.
Yeah. Excellent.
So, the Shroud of Turin is not the only miraculous image that's been brought up that's associated with Christ's passion, and there's three in particular that come up the most. And so we have in Oviedo in Spain what's called I'm going to say it wrong, help me out here.
Sudarium.
Yeah. Thank you. So this is not an image of Christ necessarily, because this is the cloth that would have been put over Christ when he was being taken down from the cross. So it's meant to cover his face out of respect as part of the burial process. And there's a great video. I added the link to our show notes again. They take you through with a replica of it, how it was placed on his face, how he was, would have been brought down from the cross. And it fits right in with the fact that this was set aside when they found the empty tomb, because it would have been taken off before he was then completed in the shroud. Then in the center here, sometimes you'll hear the phrase, the image of Edessa, which is now believed to be just one part of the folded shroud that was visible as a possibility. We talked about this in our episode on St. Nicholas, because this was the statue of St. Jude Thaddeus in St. Nicholas in Valencia, Spain. So we did talk about the tale and stuff there about how he was charged to bring an image to a king. And there's so many neat stories about it. I think I found at least 6 variations on it. They're all beautiful. Yeah. I love them.
Yeah. Do you know what? Reading it almost when you read about like the written accounts by contemporaries of, I can't remember the name of the king now, of Edessa, it almost sounds like something out of the Silmarillion. It's just beautifully written. It just seems, we do live in a really amazing world.
Yeah.
If we allow ourselves to see that. Yeah.
And then our last related miraculous image is Veronica's veil. So when we have the tradition of the woman during his journey with the cross, wiping his face, and then the image being there. And this comes out to be viewed during Holy Week every year at the Vatican, I believe every year. Not quite as detailed an image as we see in the shroud, but amazingly, all of these things match up on so many points, including the blood type.
Yeah, that's what's amazing. Yeah, all of it's so very, very cool. Very cool. So the official word, which I will definitely mingle for these kinds of miraculous images, is akaropoetos. And that means, that's the Greek word for not made by human hands. So the shroud, Our Lady of La Lajas, and Our Lady of Guadalupe, these are all miraculous images. So that would be they're examples of akaropoetos or poeta. Have you heard this word?
Good job.
Kudos for that pronunciation.
Have you heard of that word? Have you heard of that word before?
I've not heard it in Greek.
Not outside this context. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I looked up not made by human hands, and this is the word that came up for me. So maybe my computer has it out for me or something.
Well, what's interesting is when you search not made by human hands icons, many other images come up. And it's fascinating when you look at the history of some of those, because a lot of them were lost when we had invasions into the Byzantine Empire, things being burned and destroyed. And the only way that they know that that image existed once is because in tradition of iconography, they're copying these images that were made. And so they know, yes, we had this once. This isn't the original.
There's a reference to it.
Yeah. And then there's, historical reference to it. So we do know that Christ didn't always look like he does in the shroud.
Exactly. So the earliest depictions of Christ, and this is a Coptic depiction, and what struck me about this one is how Celtic it looks. Which is not unusual when it comes to Coptic iconography and Celtic iconography, shall we say. But Christ was typically depicted as a beardless young man, and kind of in the to look a little bit like Apollo. And of course, we always talk about how it's appropriate to depict someone in a way that's going to make sense to the people who are going to be viewing this art. So it's completely appropriate in Rome and around that area to have Christ depicted as a young bearded man, because that's what they would have seen, and they would have made certain associations with a young, virile, beardless man. I keep saying bearded, beardless man. And so that's how he was depicted. And there are a couple of other images, I was going to say, we can go on to the next one. And so I have a couple of images here. The first one, and I thought this was really interesting. This is in the Vatican Necropolis, and it's around the 4th century, and it's Christus Sol Invictus. And it is not how a lot of people inaccurately say, the early Christians, they just adopted these pagan ideas, and, which doesn't make any sense. But this is not an example of Christ, like just putting taking a picture of Sol Invictus and putting Christ on it and saying, oh, this is kind of the same thing. This was actually a depiction of Christ in triumph over Helios, which was the pagan Roman god. And the other two images are of the Good Shepherd, Christ the Good Shepherd. And again, look at him. He's lovely. He's this beardless young man. And, even here, there are certain elements of these images that we still recognize all these years later, which I think is incredible. The Good Shepherd.
Yeah. It's always interesting because I think I brought this up in a podcast before. The novel that I read back in high school called The Silver Chalice, about the artist who is required to go out and make a silver container to hold the chalice of Christ. And because of the time when that novel was written, there was this belief that, you go back as far as you can, and that's the most accurate image. Well, they try to go back as far as they can with how Christ was depicted. And because of all of these beardless images, they kept going over and over again in the novel saying, well, he was beardless. And so he has to be depicted beardless because that's what he really looked like. He never had a beard. So kind of throwing out the shroud altogether.
Well, that's a huge reason why some people reject the shroud, actually, because we even for our docuseries, we haven't used it yet in the edit, but I'm looking forward to being able to. We interviewed a Jewish historian, a historian of military history, and particularly of the Galilee, Judea region. And he said, men of that time, of that age, would not have had a beard if they were Jewish. So the shroud cannot be the burial cloth of Christ, which is very interesting because there are also, interpretations of Jesus being more of like a Nazarene figure, and which would have been a religious tradition, and they would have held certain practices about beards and the use of alcohol and so forth. And Jesus kind of mixed up everything, with what we know about
God.
him. Yeah. But he kind of doesn't really fit nicely into these categories, right? So that's something very interesting when you study the shroud, and whether he has a beard or not comes up.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. So
speaking of beards,
yes, beards. Oh my goodness. Yes. So what I think is interesting here is when people, again, and this is studying art, and Kathryn, I can't remember if we, my knowledge of this, whether it comes from our, classes at Pontifex or if I absorbed it someplace else. But another argument of it kind of is the mythicist argument is, Christ is just Zeus, bearded and, kind of this mighty, powerful God, which kind of doesn't suggest Zeus would have allowed himself to be crucified. That doesn't seem like he was really into that kind of thing. But if you compare, so this is a very old image of Zeus. So this is Greek, ancient Greek. But if Christ was supposed to be modeled after Zeus, then why were the earliest depictions of him showing him as beardless? That doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And also, men grow beards and long hair, it's a very, it shows you very manly, I think. And that's how it would have been interpreted in ancient Greeks as well. Although I don't know if they even really had beards traditionally in ancient Greece, certainly not in Rome. They wouldn't have had beards. But I just wanted to show the comparison between this statue of Zeus, I guess this is the negative, or is this the negative or the positive I'm looking at?
Yes, that's the negative you're looking at.
The negative that I'm looking at. And then the Pantocrator, which is just, I think, one of the most beautiful images of Christ ever created. And even though both images have, or all three images have beards, there are two that clearly resemble each other much more closely than, was it one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah. Talk about similarities.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at different images of Christ, right, we see that after the Edict of Milan, there are depictions that start to emerge, and you see these facial similarities between them. And so this is some of what we show in our exhibition when we talk about art, that you can start to compare and contrast with, for example, the long nose, the beard, which is symbolic at this point in history of a teacher or a wise figure. The eyebrows, the general proportions of the face. One interesting feature that we like to point out to people that very few people notice about depictions of Christ is that there's these little wisps of hair near the top of the forehead. Yeah. And you see that over and over again. And this is what is thought is that it might have been influenced by a small trickle of blood that is on the Shroud of Turin at that position on the face. And so perhaps when they were looking at that, they sort of thought of that being hair. Because of course they weren't seeing the wonderful AI 3D type stuff that we're seeing today, right? When we look at the shroud. So the journey of the shroud, it's likely that we'll never know exactly where it was, especially in the earlier days. Before the 14th century, but if it would have been, if it was Christ's burial cloth, it would have been hidden because of course it was dangerous for the Christians to, expose themselves, and as well, they would hide those things that are precious to them. So there is a very interesting poem from the 2nd century that refers to a double image of the King of Kings on his burial garment. Which what would that have been?
That's fascinating.
Yeah, if you think about 2nd century, that is so close to Christ's time. And so it's thought that the shroud was kind of traveling around, and you talked about Edessa going from Jerusalem probably to Edessa, Constantinople, Greece, in those early years, about 1,000 years or so. And then we start to get up to, after the Crusades, to Lille, and then to Chambéry, and finally to Turin. But so as it's traveling, you're seeing these different styles of sacred art, right? You're seeing the different locations, and you're also seeing that there are similarities, in fact, between them.
Yes, a lot of similarities. And, I was thinking, I would imagine early on, the shroud would have been with Our Lady in St. John the Evangelist in Ephesus.
Yeah, it's very possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, it's fascinating, the connection here and the consistency. And I think that's the lovely thing. Not that everything has to be the same, because here we've got 5 different versions of the same image. But because there's a consistency there, we know what we're looking at.
Right.
So there's
who we're looking at.
And we know who we're looking at. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Here's some other images. I think, Alix, you found the vase and I found the coin.
Yes.
Look how similar.
Yeah, I was just thinking about when you were talking about the book you were reading. It's like, This is a silver, I think it's silver. It's Vase de Messe, and from 575, between 575 and 625. So even younger than the coin.
Mm-hmm.
I like on the coin how you can see the little strands of hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The little wisp.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I remember in some of my first art classes for Pontifex, and Professor Clayton would talk about copying with understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these images that have been out there over and over and over again, and you copy it, but you need to understand what you're copying and why. And it was right away from the first few that I saw and seeing the similarities. I mean, the first thing that popped in my head was the shroud.
Mm-hmm.
And then I always thought the hair in in these icons does remind me of the blood trickle in the shroud. And it's crazy to think, like you said, we have now so much more technology to look at it in so much more high definition and 3D and all this other stuff. What was it like for them? And Alix, you've talked about the difference between looking at something under candlelight.
Yeah.
How did it look for them? I don't know if that's something they would ever do at your exhibit, to let people see, like, what would it look like under candlelight?
That would be pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's definitely, do you know, it would be really interesting to do that and to see how the candlelight might bring some elements of it out that we're not seeing with the light that we use today.
Yeah.
And it's neat to see throughout history how different depictions have arisen. I mean, we have the face of Christ that we saw in these last few, but now here's in a codex, a prayer manuscript that was in Hungary, laid out. Here's Christ laid out for burial, and it looks like the statue that Angela showed us earlier, the positioning. And this is back in the late 12th, early 13th century. And not only that, but then you look at the next, I took the lower portion of this image and enlarged it, and look at the detail in, some people say it's stone, but looking at herringbone woven linen, what you have there looks just like herringbone woven linen. underneath the foot of the angel.
Yeah. And this is the one. So here's my theory on this. So the herringbone, the way they've focused on the pattern of the cloth, and then you have these 4 circles. If you look closely, there are 3, one on top of the other, and then one to the left. And I was reading an article, and I hope I put it in the show notes, about how that matches up with some of the burn marks on the shroud. And I just wonder if they wouldn't have had a microscope back then, but it was someone trying to draw attention to that particular part to indicate this was, because if it survived that, it's been in a couple of fires, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's been in a couple of fires. It was kept in a silver case in the Middle Ages. And when the fire broke out, of course, they tried to extinguish the fire with water. And so when you look at the shroud, you see these symmetrical burn marks and watermarks because it would have been folded up in that case.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to assume like one of the fires was around. Well, it would have had to have been prior to this image being created. But I just think, was it sort of they thought it was a miraculous thing that it survived, and so they wanted to emphasize the little bit of damage done, but miraculously it was spared, further damage.
Yeah.
Alix, you found this image.
I did, and I found this on the British Library website, which is up and running. It's been hacked a couple of years ago, and it was like a really bad deal. So now they're up and running. So you've been warned if you want to go down a couple of rabbit holes. Go ahead. You can do it at the British Library now. But these are Anglo-Saxon images of Christ crucified, and we have a couple. But the reason I selected this one was for 2 reasons. One, you have these, it's pretty gruesome. And you have Christ has all these like blue spots on his body, which would be, I think those are indications of the scourging that he received, the bruising. So not every wound would have cut the skin, but it definitely would have bruised him. And the Holcomb Bible picture book is almost like, I guess for us, it would be almost like a graphic novel. So it has some text, but it is, for the most part, images, which I think is really, really beautiful. In this one, this is one of the only depictions I've come across where Christ is depicted completely naked. Now, everything is modest and dignified as much as it can be, but all of his suffering before he was crucified, he doesn't have any clothing on. And what's so beautiful about this image is Our Lady has taken off her veil, and she's the one who's covered him up. And I just think, and when you look, so this is just another aspect of when you're praying, when you're looking up at the crucifixion, you're looking at Our Lady of Sorrows, imagining this mother watching her son suffer and be completely humiliated, and she takes off her veil and she gives him his dignity back as much as she possibly can. I think it just speaks to their relationship, their love, and her love for him. I just thought this was such a powerful, powerful image.
Yeah. This is interesting because I've never seen Our Lady covering him like that. And it ties in with what I heard at Mass on Sunday. The priest was talking about, and I have never heard of this before, but somebody's got to know. We got Discord for that. People jump on. But supposedly there was a statement that had gone out years and years and years ago that Our Lady is never supposed to be depicted swooning at the cross.
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah. That was almost considered a heresy.
I've seen too many images where she's swooning and falling down. And then now it's like seeing this image where it's like she's standing there. She knows what's happening and she's taking care of her son to the end is like, okay, that's Mary.
If I'm not mistaken, a lot of those that she's swooning are actually Protestant paintings. So a lot of them were done that I've seen, that I'm familiar with at least, were created by Protestant painters.
A lot of the Flemish
got into the manuscripts.
Yeah, and also, in Northern Europe, the Flemish masters, a couple like Jan van Eyck. I mean, I think he had one that was depicted. It was something, I think it wasn't done out of like disrespect for her or like making her look weak. I think it was to show her passion with Christ. And but it was very quickly, certainly in the Catholic sacred art world, they kind of were like, no, that's actually not, we shouldn't be doing that. But the images are so stunningly beautiful, you want to keep them anyway. Yeah, and this is another image from the Holcomb Bible picture book. And again, he's being buried in the shroud and being laid in the tomb. And one of the things I just love about English medieval manuscript depictions are they love dots. If you think about the Lindisfarne Gospels and the Book of Kells, you have all these lovely little dots. And I think here on the shroud, the dots are probably they're not decorative. I think they're probably there to indicate blood seeping through.
And again,
and I just noticed the green halo. Sorry. That could be maybe time changing the color anyway. Sorry.
So it's neat to see. I mean, obviously, there's some impact here with what we see on the Shroud of Turin. So people saw it. You can't have these similarities without seeing it.
There are also, if you go back.
Sure.
There are also, there have been studies on the botany of the shroud. So that he would have been like swaddled like this, probably in the shroud. And then that flowers would have been laid on the shroud by the mourners, because there have been evidences of flowers shown, imprints, as well as pollens on the shroud.
Oh, I didn't know about the imprints. I'd heard about the pollen, but I never heard about imprints.
Yeah, so there was, I believe it was Avenum denoum. I don't know if I'm pronouncing or remembering that exactly correctly. Forgive me, but he is a botanist, an Israeli botanist who specializes in that region, and he was shown a negative of the shroud and purportedly was able to identify certain species that are native to that area. So, yeah, that's where that theory comes from.
Okay, that's making all kinds of connections for us with, like, in Our Lady of Las Lajas on her gown with her flowers, and we'll soon be talking about another beautiful image of Our Lady with flowers on it. So and Jesus has flowers on his shroud. This is giving me goosebumps. Here we have some more. This is actually like early depictions of the shroud in art, which I found really fascinating. And what's unique about these two images is, do you see the difference between the two?
Well, one is a lot more detailed than the other. Is that?
That's part of it.
Okay.
There's something missing in the book version.
Yeah, they're not actually putting it on Christ in the book version.
That's right.
There's no burns. There's no burn marks on the shroud.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Before it was damaged, an image of the shroud, which I found fascinating, that they would like think to depict it before and after the burn. It's just really
that is fascinating.
Just kind of to know it's visible, it's out there. The impact it's had on art is just perpetuating through history, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to point out, and this is why I'm like curious about candlelight, is look at how much detail you have on the image from the disposition of Christ on the left. I mean, that's quite a bit. That's almost like the negative, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a lot more definition there.
Yeah. So I'm just it would be, so you have to do that. You'll have to present that idea to just see what it looks like with candlelight.
And then we have these images are all of the same special liturgical linen that's used in the Orthodox churches. And so this is it's called a Holy Shroud. You can see the images of Christ resemble the Holy Shroud. So it's not just the Western Church. The Eastern Church has also kept this tradition going. And this linen would have been used during Good Friday and Holy Saturday.
Holy Saturday. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have that entombment of Christ. And it's just, again, here we have this consistency of image throughout East and West. I love it when the church comes together like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's in the Ambrosian Rite in the Catholic Church. The linen that is put on the altar is called a shroud.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably been called a shroud for a long time because the Ambrosian Rite is really old.
But before we go on to more images and why we're looking at these, I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. Sorry about that. And our patrons who make it possible to create the secrets of sacred art, including Gregory N., Jason M., Richard H., Ramona F., and it's Moses K. And, thank you for your generous donations. We do have a new URL. So the donations are now at givestarquest.com. And that makes it possible for us to continue all the shows, including Secrets of Sacred Art and all the other great ones out there. And so please visit givestarquest.com. So new link to giving at StarQuest.
So this one that we're looking at is a poster that was created for the Turin Cathedral. So this would have been in the late 1800s that the cathedral was going to display the shroud in public. And the church provided an opportunity for indulgence, which is the terms and conditions are on the bottom of the poster for the indulgence. But I love this depiction because it has just a wonderful recreation. Again, this was before photography, remember, of the shroud. So the shroud was photographed after this poster was created. It was photographed by an amateur photographer in 1898. And so you see the imprint of the body. You see so detailed the burn marks. But you also see this wonderful history of the shroud. And it is explained as the Holy Shroud of Turin with the Chapelle at Chambéry on the left and the Saint Giovanni Battista at Turin on the right, which is the name of the cathedral where the shroud is kept in Turin. And it also on the bottom has these depictions of the encounter of the Duke Emmanuel Filbert of Savoy. So it was the Savoy family that had the shroud before they bequeathed them to the popes, with Saint Charles Borromeo. And Charles Borromeo came to venerate the shroud because of the plague that happened in Milan, where he was the bishop And so he came to give thanks for that. And then the entombment of Christ in the center, beautifully done. And the presentation of the shroud to Godfrey of Bouillon in Jerusalem. So he would have been the crusader that is credited with kind of saving the shroud. So just this whole beautiful history along with the indulgence. I just thought it'd be perfect to kind of talk about with this whole history of sacred art in the shroud.
I want to talk about the skill of the engravers.
Oh my gosh, I know.
I know.
That's just
beautifully done.
Blows my mind. I'm like taking a moment to zoom in. I have another source I'm looking at the slides with. People, if you have the chance, pause, take the time, zoom in and look at the
detailed.
detail.
Yeah.
I mean, just the soft detail of the shroud alone. That's incredible.
Yeah. And what's interesting when you talk about this history of the shroud and when it was being displayed more, so it would have been displayed more in the latter part of its history. And that's also when we start to see greater devotion to the suffering of Christ. Because remember, before that, the depictions of Christ were, right, the good shepherd and the teacher, the wise figure with the, seated with the beard.
Yeah.
And then you start to get that suffering of Christ much later, and relatively late. And so it's thought that perhaps the shroud being more available starting around the 1300s, 1400s, and then moving further into time, into our time, would have had an impact on people having a greater devotion to the Holy Face and to the suffering of Christ.
That's interesting because I'm also thinking about, the Catholic Church has a theology on suffering, and which is not really, I'm not going to pretend like I know every Christian denomination and their theology on suffering, but I think the Catholic development of that theology was probably also influenced by looking and contemplating this shroud, because of course it the suffering makes sense if you can see something like this and something that's miraculous. So speaking of suffering, this is something that I was trying to think of how other artists might not, maybe they didn't see the shroud, maybe they didn't ever go to Jerusalem or anything like that, but they had these images were slowly making their way across Christendom, and how someone who might not have seen the shroud would have then, because of this kind of these traveling ideas of the suffering Christ, would have been able to depict him. And this is from the workshop of Albert Boutz, 1525. And it's oil on probably wood paneling with, it looks like it's probably has some gilding in the background, which is also beautiful. But this is a real suffering Christ, it's quite, sometimes these things are difficult to look at. And when you look at his hands, it's agonizing. It kind of reminds me of, I didn't even try to find it because every time I try to find Norwegian crucifixes, I fail miserably at the museums. But when we were in Norway, there was a medieval crucifix of the suffering Christ. And I mean, it was, have you ever looked at something and you physically hurt when you're looking at it? Mm-hmm. That's what this was like. And yet I was so drawn to it. I just could not stop looking at it. And we would go a lot to this museum and I just would sit there and contemplate on this, the pain. And a friend of mine said, whoever depicted this must have been very closely familiar with pain and torture. Like, how do you even depict something like this? And I said, yeah, but what I thought was really fascinating with that image, which reminds me of this one, is Christ's hair was gilded in gold. So if this was if this had been hanging up in a church, which it probably would have been, at some point, I'm sure they would have put it in a position where the sun would have come through and hit it, and he would have been glowing. Oh, so incredible. And I think it's probably a similar thing with this image, with the gold gilding in the background. The light hits it just the right way, and this suffering is just illuminated.
Wow. That's powerful.
It is. This is another one. We've actually featured this image in when we talked about the Stations of the Cross. I had never heard of this. This was a tradition in Europe at one point, and it's called Christ on a Cold Rock by Juan de Flandes. And again, I can see where the influence of the shroud is coming in by the way his hands are crossed. Even though he's alive, it's almost like the Man of Sorrows image where it's like he's dead, but they have him sitting up in the tomb. But this is Christ on a cold stone. You can see the lashings from the scourging. But again, I think what struck me here was the crossing of his arms. Very unusual, but certainly consistent with the shroud.
It's one of those things where once you see the shroud, you start seeing echoes of it. If you're looking
exactly, that's a great way to describe it. Yeah, echoes. Yeah. And again, I'm getting all of my Northern European tendencies up here. So this is the Eisenheim altarpiece by now I can't think of his name, but it's the Eisenheim altarpiece. Again, this was originally in a chapel at a hospital that served people who were suffering from different types of skin disorders. And, some people say, Christ was depicted with his skin torn to show sympathy and to allow the people who were suffering with skin diseases to kind of make a connection, to offer up their sufferings with the suffering of Christ. And I think, yes, on one level, you certainly can say that. And but I think on another level, again, I think there's a reference to the scourging. That's a reality as well. And again, going back to the shroud, and you can even see in the lower portion of the screen, you can see him being buried. And I just want to mention quickly, if you see Kathryn, you can see a swooning Blessed Mother in this. Yeah.
Yep. There she is.
Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah, and like I said, oh no, that's okay. We can go on. But just there was an intimate knowledge of some kind of. I mean, I know things were rough in the Middle Ages, but that level of suffering and torture wasn't every day. We wouldn't be here today if it was like that every day. Yes. So, and then here we go again. Here are all of my images. So again, wanting to show the consistency with this image of Christ, and the Pantocrator is such a powerful, beautiful image. And one is from Spain, and I think, Kathryn, we featured some of the images from this church, which is now a museum, when we talked about the Holy Grail. And I read in one of the articles about the connection between the shroud and the Pantocrator images is, if you look in the first one from Spain, the red, like the little red cheeks and the red on his forehead, some people think that when Christ is depicted with that might be a reference to the blood on the shroud. Have you heard of that, Angela?
I personally haven't, but I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that this Jesus Christ Pantocrator in the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul is again the and this is huge. This one is supposed to be really, really huge. And it was so beautiful that when the Ottomans came in and they were taking over Constantinople and turned it into Istanbul because depicting the human person is forbidden in Islam. You know, of course, they were destroying a lot of things. But the Sultan who was in charge of the troops, when he went into the Hagia Sophia, he said, let's just cover this up instead of destroying it, because it was that beautiful. And the last one is the Hungarian Holy Crown. So this is so we were going from a huge image of the Pantocrator to a much smaller one, and he's got a little bit of the hair coming down. I'm sure there's some kind of theological reason for showing that hair because it's so consistent. I mean, you could say, oh, it's because of the blood stains that they were interpreting as hair, but I mean, I wonder if it's in reference to the Trinity or something else, you know. But it's so consistent in so many things. And this Holy Crown, I'd love to do a show on this. It's fascinating. Saint Stephen I of Hungary had this, and it's more than just something you wear in your head. This is something that has blessings come upon the country and all kinds of things with this crown. I also want to point out the chair. That's another thing. We can look in the Lindisfarne Gospels. We see that kind of cushioned chair all over the place.
Oh yeah, that's what's been fun over the years, is seeing just the spread of the gospel visually in the art. And this one, okay, Alix, you found this. I'm still trying to figure out your connection with the shroud on this one. So
yes, so this is the image of the resurrection from the Eisenheim altarpiece, and I have to say it is I think this is my favorite image of Christ. I love this so much. And the reason I thought about this, not that when this was being painted, they would have had an idea of, this bright burst of light and that sort of thing. But it looks like they almost did have an idea of it. And you can see the shroud being lifted up and transformed in this bright, it's just impossible light coming from Christ. And so that's what, when I read about how the theory is, this is how much this burst of light that was needed to create this image. I immediately thought about this. And this image also reminds me of the Eucharist. And and I just love it. And this is one of those images for me. It just sings. I love this image.
And this is where, Alix, you talked about, loving the burst of light. And then Angela, when did they come up with the theory or the possibility that it would have had to have been an extreme burst of energy in a brief time? Is it fairly recent?
Oh yeah, fairly recent, and definitely after this was painted. I mean, I don't know when this was painted, but almost certainly. Yeah, unless it was painted within the last 10 years or so.
No, this is from the 1400s.
Yeah. This image and the burst of light makes me think about the recent discovery of the burst of light that appears at conception. Have you seen
that? We've just now discovered through technology as well, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yeah, and so it's like we have this whole tie-in with, his burst of light at conception. I mean, his burst of light would have been amazing. I've heard that Mary has revealed to people that slow down and when you say the rosary, and especially when you talk about Christ, being born of her, because it's like she experiences it every time. So it's like live in that moment. And then so we have that burst of light. We have the burst of light in his transfiguration, and now the burst of light in his resurrection. And to think of that image like a super copy machine, supernatural copy machine.
Supernatural
copy.
Yes. Yeah. So, let there be light.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. I was going to say Genesis, going back all the way to Genesis, and then the echoes of that in the gospel according to John, right?
It's beautiful.
The word.
Yeah. And I love how this whole idea and notion and the depiction of Christ and in the light and something that is supernatural and impossible at the same time, it really draws you back into a reality that is much more interesting than all the time we spend on the horizontal level here in our world. So many things are so easy for us, and technology is I like technology. Trust me, I really do. Especially since living in a house with low technology. But these kinds of things take you to that higher plane of reality, and I love how it's been depicted in art and how that art has been influenced by something that just incredible that happened. The resurrection.
And now I have kind of a challenge for our viewers and listeners, because this was at Mass on Sunday. I love when God gives you these little thins. An Irish friend told me, God gives you these little thins where the wall between heaven and earth is so thin. You get these little things. So sitting in Mass on Sunday, and, trying to stay focused on what's happening at Mass. But then again, I can't get the shroud out of my head. And we start singing, Godhead here in hiding, get to the 7th verse, which is Jesus whom I look at shrouded here below. I beseech thee, send me what I thirst for so. Someday to gaze on thy face, gaze on thee face to face in light, and be blessed forever with thy glory sight. And this is Thomas Aquinas writing this hymn, 1200s. And then I'm here, and of course, shrouded here below just jumps out the page at me. And then I look over, and directly across the church from each other, we have the last station of the cross, where Christ is being placed in the tomb, and he's in the shroud and positioned almost like the statue. Sorry, it's so blurry. I was snapping pictures so fast I didn't want to miss it. My husband's like, why are you taking pictures on the hymnal? I'm like, just let me get this done. And then to see him in the baptismal stained glass window and going, well, there's the position of the shroud again. And it's like, okay, and these are all these invitations to like, here I am. Just look for me. Here I am. Exactly.
And and the more you look, the more you see. That's what that's what sacred art should do. And the more we learn about the shroud, the more you see. I mean, it's not like, that's it. We're done. It's like, wait a minute. Now that, now we have like technology to do this, and they apply it to the shroud, and it's this amazing thing just another thing that comes up. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. I think San Antonio, Texas is on my travel list now. So.
But not in the summertime.
No, wouldn't recommend it. We are indoors. But
okay, well, there you go. That's a plus.
Air conditioning.
I hear the riverfront's nice, though, right? Even in the summer.
Oh yeah,
definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Yes, and thank you for listening to The Secrets of Sacred Art on StarQuest, and a special thanks to our guest, Angela Selena. Thank you, Angela.
Yes. Thank you for the invitation. The contemplation of our Lord's face is something that, we can never finish, right? That we can always continue to do and look forward to.
Well, get used to it here, because that's what we want to do that forever. So
yes.
That's right.
Get your practice in here. Yeah. So to find previous episodes of The Secrets of Sacred Art and to send feedback please visit sqpn.com/sacredart. You can send us comments by email at sacredart@sqpn.com or by leaving us a comment on YouTube. Join us in conversation by visiting Sacred Art channel on the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord.
Yeah, and I'd like any of our Discord people out there, if you've got an image that reminds you of the shroud, then share it with us. We'd love to
that'd be a great idea.
talk about all these different images. So, now, we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing more sacred and intriguing fabrics in the church. Maybe not as intriguing as the shroud,
no,
but right up there. We're going to
Yes.
take a look at the sacred art of vestments in our next episode, Clothed in Glory. Until then, I'm Kathryn Laffrey.
And I'm Alix Murray, hoping you find something beautiful. Bye-bye.